You've seen thousands of birds in your life, in your yard, at the park, on the sidewalk, in the trees. And yet, you've probably never seen a dead bird, not lying in the grass, not on a branch, not anywhere. Where are they? Birds die every single day, millions of them. Disease, predation, old age, starvation, accidents. The mortality rate of wild birds is extraordinarily high. Studies estimate that roughly 50% of songbirds die in their first year of life. For every cardinal at your feeder this morning, statistically half of its siblings from last year's brood are already dead. So where are the bodies? This is not a small question. This is one of the most commonly asked questions in ornithology, and the answer is far more specific and far stranger than most people realize. Welcome to Bird Whisper. Subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn will change the way you think about the absence of something you've been noticing your entire life without knowing you were noticing it. Today, we're going into why you almost never see dead birds, what actually happens in the final hours and minutes of a bird's life, and where the bodies go. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover involves a behavior that researchers have only recently documented. And it suggests that some bird species may have something that looks remarkably close to what we would call awareness of death. Let's start with the numbers, because the scale of this mystery is bigger than most people grasp. North America is home to roughly 7.5 billion landbirds at any given time, according to a 2019 study published in the journal Science. The annual mortality rate for adult songbirds averages between 40 and 60% depending on the species. That means that in any given year, somewhere between 3 and 4.5 billion birds die in North America alone. 3 to 4.5 billion. If even a fraction of those bodies remained visible for more than a few hours, you would see dead birds constantly. You would see them in your yard, on your street, in every park, on every trail. And yet you don't. The statistical probability that you should have encountered far more dead birds than you actually have is overwhelming. So what's happening to them? The answer has several parts, and the first one is the most straightforward. Birds don't die where you're looking. When a bird is sick, injured, or entering the final stages of life due to age or disease, its behavior changes in very specific ways. Research on avian behavior during terminal illness, documented in studies on everything from West Nile virus to avian influenza, shows that sick birds become lethargic, disoriented, and most importantly, they seek cover. A healthy bird operates in open or semi-open spaces where it can see predators coming and escape quickly. A bird that knows, in whatever way birds know things, that it is compromised, that it cannot fly well or react quickly, retreats to the densest cover it can find. Thick underbrush, the interior of a shrub, dense ground vegetation, tall grass, the base of a hedgerow, places where a predator is less likely to spot it, and places where, if it dies, the body will be concealed from view. This behavior is not conscious strategy in the way humans plan. It is instinctive threat response. A bird that cannot escape a predator effectively hides instead. And the place it hides to avoid predators in its final hours is the same place that conceals its body after death. This is why you rarely see dead birds in the open. They are not dying in the open. They are dying in the places you don't look, the places you can't see into, the undergrowth and dense vegetation that you walk past every day without a second glance. If you were to push aside the branches at the base of every overgrown shrub in your neighborhood, you would find more dead birds. But you don't do that. No one does. And so the bodies remain hidden, not because they've been removed, but because they were never visible to begin with. But concealment alone doesn't explain the full absence. Because even in places where birds do die in the open, on lawns or driveways or sidewalks, the bodies disappear quickly. Research on scavenger efficiency, particularly studies done on urban and suburban bird mortality, shows that the average time a small bird carcass remains visible in an area with active scavenger populations is between 30 minutes and 4 hours. 30 minutes to 4 hours. If the bird dies overnight, which many sick birds do because nighttime is when their compromised metabolism can no longer sustain body temperature. The body is often gone by the time you wake up. The scavengers that remove bird carcasses are not what most people picture. You're not looking for vultures circling or coyotes dragging away a cardinal. You're looking at much smaller, far more common scavengers. Ants, beetles, flies, and other insects begin working on a bird carcass within minutes of death in warm weather. A single carcass can be stripped of soft tissue by insect activity within hours under the right conditions. But the faster, more complete removal happens because of vertebrate scavengers that most people don't think of as scavengers at all. Domestic cats are one of the most efficient removers of bird carcasses in suburban and urban areas. A study published in the journal Nature Communications estimated that free-ranging domestic cats in the United States kill between 1.3 and 4 billion birds annually. But cats don't just kill live birds. They also scavenge. A dead or dying bird on the ground is an easy meal, and cats patrol territories regularly, often at night when you're not watching. A cat encountering a dead bird on a lawn at 3 a.m. will remove it. You wake up. The bird is gone. You never knew it was there. Raccoons, opossums, skunks, and foxes, all of which are common in suburban areas and increasingly common in urban areas, are opportunistic scavengers. They don't need the bird to be fresh. They will take a carcass in any stage of decay. Crows and ravens, which are highly intelligent and constantly scanning their territories for food, will take dead birds. Blue jays, which are omnivorous and opportunistic, will scavenge. Even squirrels, which most people think of as nut eaters, will scavenge bird carcasses for protein, especially in winter when other food is scarce. The efficiency of scavenger networks in removing small carcasses is so high that researchers studying bird mortality often have to check locations multiple times per day to document deaths before the evidence is removed. But there's a third part of this that's less intuitive and more unsettling. Some birds don't leave bodies because they are consumed before they die. Predation is one of the leading causes of death in wild birds, and predation, by definition, does not leave a visible carcass in the place where you would see it. A sharp-shinned hawk takes a chickadee mid-flight. There's no body on the ground. The hawk carries it to a perch, consumes it, and drops indigestible parts, bones, feathers, in a location far from where you walk. A Cooper's hawk takes a mourning dove at your feeder. You see an explosion of feathers. By the time you go outside to look, the hawk is gone, and so is the dove. What's left are a few feathers scattered on the lawn, and within an hour, those feathers blow away or get picked up by other birds for nesting material. The evidence of death disappears almost as fast as the death itself happened. Owls are even more efficient. A great horned owl or a screech owl hunting at night takes a sleeping bird from a roosting site. The kill happens in darkness. The owl consumes the bird whole or in large pieces and regurgitates a pellet containing the indigestible parts hours later, often miles away from the kill site. You never see the bird. You never see the predation event. The only evidence that it happened is a pellet on the ground under a distant tree. And unless you know what you're looking at, you walk past it without noticing. Mammalian predators, cats, foxes, weasels, do the same. They take the bird, they consume it elsewhere. The site of death is cleaned by the predator's behavior. No body remains. So when you combine these factors, concealment by the dying bird, rapid scavenging of any exposed carcass, and consumption via predation that leaves no remains in visible locations, the statistical probability that you will encounter a dead bird drops dramatically. You would need to be in the right place, a place where a bird died in the open, at the right time, the narrow window between death and scavenger removal, and in a location you actually look at closely, not underbrush or dense cover, to see a dead bird. That combination of factors is rare, which is why your perception that you never see dead birds is accurate. You don't. Not because they aren't dying, but because every ecological process that follows death is optimized to remove the evidence quickly. Now let's talk about the part of this question that gets uncomfortable, the part about whether birds have awareness of their own death or the deaths of other birds. For a long time, The assumption in ornithology was that birds do not have a concept of death, that they lack the cognitive architecture required to understand mortality as an abstract concept. But research over the past 15 years has begun to complicate that assumption, particularly when it comes to corvids, crows, ravens, jays, and magpies. In 2015, researchers at the University of Washington published a study that documented something unexpected. When crows encountered a dead crow, they didn't ignore it. They gathered. Multiple crows would arrive at the site of a dead crow, sometimes dozens of them, and engage in what researchers called mobbing behavior. They would call loudly, circle the body, land near it, and remain in the area for extended periods, sometimes 15 to 20 minutes or longer. The behavior was consistent. It happened across different crow populations, and it wasn't predator-directed. The crows weren't mobbing a threat. They were responding to the dead crow itself. What made this even more striking was what happened afterward. The researchers tested whether crows would return to locations where they had encountered dead crows. They did not. Crows that had participated in a mobbing event around a dead crow avoided that location for weeks afterward, even though it was in their territory and even though food was available there. The presence of a dead crow had marked that location as dangerous in the minds of the living crows. They had learned something from the death. They had updated their threat assessment of that space. This is not proof that crows understand death in the philosophical sense that humans do. But it is evidence that crows recognize dead crows as significant, that they respond to death with specific, repeated behaviors, and that the experience of encountering a dead individual changes their future behavior. That is not nothing. Other corvid species show similar behaviors. Magpies have been observed bringing grass and covering the bodies of dead magpies, a behavior that has no obvious survival function and looks, to human observers, like something closer to mourning or burial. Western scrub jays, according to research from the University of California, Davis, will stop caching food and increase alarm calling when a dead jay is nearby, behaviors that suggest heightened vigilance and social communication about the death. Whether these behaviors should be called funerals or grief or rituals is a question researchers are careful about. The terms carry human emotional and cultural weight that may not apply. But what is not in question is that these birds are doing something. They are not ignoring death. They are responding to it in ways that are consistent, socially coordinated, and behaviorally complex. For most songbirds, the evidence of death awareness is thinner. There are anecdotal reports of cardinals or robins remaining near a dead mate for hours, calling, returning repeatedly, behaving in ways that suggest distress. But anecdotal reports are not scientific evidence, and the behaviors could be explained by other factors: territorial defense, confusion, or continued pair bonding behavior that hasn't yet updated to reflect the partner's absence. What is clear is that most small songbirds do not engage in group responses to dead individuals the way corvids do. Whether that reflects a cognitive difference, a social structure difference, or simply a difference in how much energy a small bird can afford to spend on non-survival behaviors is still an open question. Here's what you should take from all of this. The absence of dead birds in your daily experience is not an accident. It is the result of overlapping evolutionary strategies, predator avoidance that drives dying birds into concealment, scavenger efficiency that removes exposed carcasses within hours, and predation itself that consumes birds before bodies can appear. The question of where dead birds go has a specific, observable answer. They go into dense cover. They go into the stomachs of scavengers. They go into the talons and beaks of predators. They are processed by insects, by bacteria, by the same decomposition systems that handle every dead organism. They disappear not because of mystery, but because of ecology. And yet, for some species, there may be something more happening. A